is married to Rebecca. So she is sharing her husband with us, which is awesome. So thank you, Rebecca.
She claims that now, but afterwards we'll see if she'll still raise her hand. Well, for all those that said, hey, we have a new woman in here, but she's kind of homely, you're half right. I'm not a new woman, but I am kind of homely. So I wanted to come share my story, redemption, and just what happened to me. It's a story, and it's really not the story that glorifies me at all. It's a story that glorifies our God. And it's the redemption of my God, your God, our God. How many people in here have an electronic device? Just raise your hand. I figured there'd be a few. I'm an IT guy, so that's a good thing. When you get electronic devices, you have to upgrade them. A lot of times you have to get new software, you have to get that fixed. I don't know how many people have ever had the pleasure of being on the 1.0 version of any software, but if you know what 1.0 means, it's usually very buggy, it's very unstable, it never lives up to its promises, and you can't wait for the next release to come out. Well, my story, redemption, will start with me as version 1.0, because that's where I was. So a little bit about myself. This is a story I love to tell because it's all about me. Just a little bit about myself. I was raised in a church-going family, and I learned a lot of the rules. I learned how to behave. I've kind of forgotten how to do that, but it was all about rules and behavior and appearance. When I got to high school, a lot of that changed when a youth director, a very energetic youth director, wrote a letter to me and got me involved in the youth group. I wasn't really involved in the church as much as I was the youth group. And it really started to lead me to a relationship with Christ for the first time. And it was a great endeavor. I'll say that he brought me to Christ for the first time. He also brought me to my wife because he is now my brother-in-law. So it's his fault that I'm in this family. Attended church fairly regularly until my 20s. In my 20s is when a lot of things changed. The world changed who I was. I started to listen to the world about what it meant to be a man. I started to listen to the commercials. I started to listen to the news. I was a really happy person going into my 20s. I was carefree. Nothing bothered me. It all rolled off my back. But as I went through my 20s, a lot changed. I became defined as to who I was in my job. My title, the acceptance of people and groups, that became my identity. And that's a really scary place to be. But I'm afraid there's a lot of people that fall into that because our world is so influential that way. I turned all my energy to working, to earning money, and that came at the expense of my family. I felt that the best way to serve my family is to bring home bigger checks, bigger bonuses, and stock options. And to be honest, what my family wanted was more of me, not more money. I had to wrap my head around that. It was a really warped thinking. The devil got a hold of me. And I'll say as husband 1.0, I had some real issues. And I'm not saying it's bad to be a provider. Please don't get me wrong. Don't go home and, if your husband's working today, beat him up because he's working and not spending time with you, because then he's going to come beat me up, and I don't want to do that. But it became my priority. My number one priority in life was my career. It wasn't my family, and it wasn't God. It should have been God. Money was my primary focus. And if I look at what was written in Peter, and I highlighted a couple of lines in here about what I was called to be as a father and as a husband, as an elder, and pretty much an elder of the family, watching over people not because you must, but because you were willing. Mine was more of a duty. It wasn't an honor, and it wasn't something I wanted to do. It also says, not lording over those who entrust you, but being examples to the flock. And I don't think anybody who knew me back then would say I was an example to the flock. Nobody who followed Jesus or knew Jesus would say that. My spiritual life was falling very short at this time. I wasn't praying. I wasn't praying much. I spent a lot of time telling God what I needed. I wasn't listening for that whisper of God's voice. And that puts you into a very dangerous place. So how did I justify being a Christian? Well, let me tell you. Everything in my life was a checklist. So, was I in a men's group? Check. I'm good. Did I go to church? Did I give some money to church? I didn't tithe, but I gave some money. It wasn't sacrificial giving by any stretch. Did I volunteer? Oh gosh, yes. Did I do some mission work? And I'll say some mission work, but my heart wasn't in it. It was taken away from my career if I was doing mission work. Even scarier was, am I respected at church? I looked for my identity at church as well. So that's what led me to becoming what I'll call a complacent Christian. And that's a really bad place to be. Because as a complacent Christian, I don't think you realize where you are. As I looked through that and I read through Revelations, one thing that stood out to me was that comment about, are you hot or are you cold? And God wants you to be hot or cold. He doesn't want you to be lukewarm. And I was listening to a sermon from Todd White a couple of years ago where I thought he explained this very well. It's the first time it really made sense to me. If you're cold, you do no damage to the kingdom. If you're hot, you're pushing the kingdom forward. But if you're lukewarm, people will hear your words, but see your actions differently, and you're actually doing more damage to the kingdom than you are good. And that really hit hard with me. My prayer life changed. I got very busy. So I literally prayed. This was an honest prayer that I had, and oh Lord, forgive me for even bringing it up. But God, send me a billboard because I don't have time to do subtle. I mean, if you think about what I just prayed, first of all, God, I've got the plan. Come join me. Wow. How he didn't just go, done with that one, I honestly don't know. I'm glad he did, but actually he kind of did. But what an arrogant prayer. I was so focused on my plans and what I needed to do. Then a wonderful thing happened in my career. I got the chance to stand up a company. Now, that's a great thing on a resume if you want to be a CEO. That is a really crappy thing for somebody who's in my position, in my relationship with Christ. And the reason is, the first thing you have to do to stand up a company is go through a ton of legal contracts. So I became very good at figuring out what could happen, what could go wrong, what might go wrong, who could be an enemy. None of this actually happened, but in contracts, that's what you have to plan for. But what happened over 3 years is I became a very negative person. I could see the negative in every situation. You know, if a mechanic worked on my car and it didn't go well, he was out to get me. It wasn't he just made a mistake or had a bad day. He was out to get me. So that's kind of where I ended up. When I read through Corinthians, or Colossians, I read through Corinthians too, but I'm going to read through Colossians now. You can tell I'm not the best speaker in the world. When I read through Colossians and I look at what God says his chosen ones are, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, forgiving each other, and above all, putting on love. I don't think people would have described me as that at all. I think I have fallen far enough away that that's not who I was. Now, I want to make this next point very clear. I love my wife and kids. And I want you guys to know that because it's going to come up later. So on the left, that's my daughter down in the Smoky Mountains that we were hiking together. On my right, that's my son Jake. And that was taken when we were on an ATV trip in West Virginia playing around. Love those two. I love my wife. We'll see if she still loves me after this. I'm not perfect, but I have a freaking awesome wife. And that's close enough. And I'll stand behind that all day. She is my better half. She's my better 3/4. She's my better 99%. These are the pictures that we took when I was husband 1.0, but this is actually what she was feeling. No, I'm not going to leave that up long. So fast forward to April 10th, 2011. My daughter is being confirmed in the church. It's a wonderful experience. She actually came to this on her own. We actually laid hands on her, prayed in the church service, and I can remember thinking this is one of those incredible moments where I'm never going to forget this. It's just awesome. The pastor that day was John, is a friend of mine. His sermon was on Jesus' last words, and he said, there's only 2 things you can be sure of in life. Death, taxes. And he said, you're all going to experience one this week. Then he quickly backed up and said, I'm not predicting anybody's demise. It's tax week. Okay, good enough. But on the way out, I happened to walk past John and I said, John, you kind of left me in a tight position. I paid my taxes early. He looked at me and said, Tom, sometimes a pastor just knows, and winked at me and walked away. Now that'll be an interesting comment later in this. So we get in the car and we're driving home, and it feels like a small nail hits me in the chest. And then my jaw goes numb. And then my arm goes numb. And then I start sweating profusely, kind of like I was earlier. All the classic signs of a heart attack, but I'm too stupid to realize that I'm having a heart attack. Beck, on the other hand, doesn't. She immediately tells me to pull over, gives me an aspirin, jumps in the seat of the Honda Odyssey, which turned into some kind of NASCAR taking me to the hospital. It was amazing. I get to the hospital, a young, energetic nurse comes out, and she's like, Tom Huber. And I'm like, that's me. She goes, come on back. Do you need a wheelchair? I'm thinking, oh, I'm a man. I don't need no freaking wheelchair. So I walk back in the room. She takes off my shirt. They start getting the EKG machine out, and that's when that nail got replaced with a fence post. It felt like somebody drove a fence post through my chest. It's pain that I have never experienced. I don't know how to compare it to anything else, and I sure as heck am not going to compare it to childbirth in this room right now, because there's 20 of you between me and the door, and I have a feeling I'd learn a new pain if that was the case. Once that happened, they got the EKG hooked up, all of a sudden the tone in the room changed. It wasn't light anymore, it wasn't fun, and I sure wasn't having a good time anymore. They immediately moved me to a trauma room. I get moved into a trauma room and things totally changed. It's very business-like. There's no casual conversation. There's a lot of work going on between doctors and nurses, and they're not consulting me on anything or even explaining anything to me. And at this point, I'm going to do the best job I can to explain what happened to me, but I don't have the words. You already know I'm not a great speaker. I don't have the language to explain this, but I'm still going to do my best. English, by the way, is my second language. We just don't know what my first name is. What happens is all of a sudden I'm away. I'm gone. I'm not in that ER room anymore. The pain that I was feeling is all gone. The suffering is gone. That chaos and the anxiety of the ER room is gone. And I'm floating. I'm floating away. It's very light where I am. It's a welcome relief from the pain that was in my chest. I can remember thinking, where am I? And I can think, I don't really care. I just want to stay here because I'm done with the pain. As I get deeper and deeper into this place, it's warm. It's kind of like if you're walking in a field in the spring where the sun and the wind make that perfect combination of temperature for you. And that's what it was. It was just peace, and it was just wonderful. The color white was everywhere. And it's interesting because it's not like the white here. And this is where it gets hard to explain to people what I'm experiencing. The white that I'm looking at is like the brilliance and radiance of all the fall colors when the leaves are changing for the winter. And the golden sun of the morning is just highlighting it perfectly. That's what the white looked like. And how do you say, oh, it was white? And people are like, well, how are you excited about white? I mean, every hospital's white. But it's amazing. I can remember sitting there just being, and I was never afraid, but my kind of wonder turned to joy, and I just felt incredible. And then I noticed a concentration of light in the center, and I'm being pulled towards it. And as I get closer to this concentration, it's very clear to me that it's the center of this place. It's the reason for this place. I wrestle with how I know these things, but these thoughts just keep popping into my head over and over. What was really cool was then all of a sudden, and I can't explain how it happened, but God just put the thought in my head, you're here, I am Jesus, and you're near heaven. And it was an amazing thing. I sat there and I just was in total awe. I don't know how else to explain it. But one of the things that I think really hit me as I was reading through Matthew, and at the area where Jesus, after 6 days, took Peter, James, and John and his brother, the poor guy, all he got named is his brother, led him up the mountain. And there he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And that is exactly what I experienced. I was amazed when I read that for the first time. The communication to me was amazing too, because it wasn't God and I having a conversation like this. It was God putting thoughts into my head. And it was really cool. I was reading through Psalms and I hit this verse, and it really hit home with me about what it was. How precious are your thoughts, God? How vast are the sum of them? And it really hit home with me about how amazing this moment really was. So for the second time this day, I had one of those moments where I knew I would never forget what was just going on. The one thing that was amazing to me is sin was not there, and I was struck by it. I was struck by the total absence of sin. There's no hate. There's no evil. There's no destruction. There's no anger. There's no division. There's no sadness. There's no anxiety. It's just amazing how it's absent and it's gone. Then another one of those thoughts pops into my head, and it was very clear that Jesus was telling me, Tom, sin doesn't exist here. It has no power here. And as I'm looking around and noticing the absence of sin, what I see is the abundance of the fruits of the Spirit. They flow like waterfalls. The joy, the peace, the grace, the love is everywhere. And it's just overwhelming. I use words like awesome, incredible, perfect. But we use those for things on earth, and it just pales in comparison to anything I've ever experienced. As I look around, I see smaller points of lights all around. And I don't know what they are. I don't know if those are family members that went before me, if they're spirits, if they're angels, but they're welcoming me. And I feel that welcome, and it's just wonderful. I know that I'm in heaven, and I feel an unconditional welcome. Heaven is part of me, and it has a grip on my spirit at this point that I can't explain. As the light gets closer and clearer, the joy expands at an exponential rate. I thought I was at a point where I was experiencing all I could, but it just keeps getting better and keeps getting better. And then it hits me. What I'm experiencing is really, this is home. I'm home. And I used to always get that feeling when we walk into the house from a long time being away, you walk into the garage, you take your luggage through the door, you smell the house, you see that familiar house, and you go, oh, I'm home. I don't get that anymore. I'm like, I'm in that building. I know what home is now, and it's not my house, let me tell you. God had a plan for me, and that plan was to soften my heart through this experience. Now, as I'm relaxing and enjoying and really taking this all in, I'm back on the ER table. And let me tell you, I am not happy to be back on the ER table. I look around, I see my wife and my sister out in the hallway crying. Now, I've got to wrestle with the fact, I'm not sure if they're crying because I died or if they're crying because I just came back. So, if you guys could help me with that later, kind of quiz back, I'd appreciate that. I would love to say that my first thought as a man of God was to stay here and be here for my wife and my kids. I would love to say that, but I can't. If God would have asked me, hey, Tom, do you want to stay here or do you want to go back to earth? I wouldn't be here right now. There's no way I would talk to you this way. Maybe I'd float through as a spirit, but that's a whole other topic for another day. I didn't want to come back. I tried to close my eyes multiple times. Nurse Molly wasn't going to have any of that. She kept slapping me, going, stay with me, Tom. If she'd have seen what I've seen, maybe she would have shut up. And then that led to a conversation which I knew was going to be really difficult. I didn't tell my wife what happened for 2 days because I was terrified of her question. And I finally got the courage to say, Becca, I went to heaven. And she asked me, she said, what was it like? And I talked to her about it. And then she asked me that question. I was like, oh gosh, really? Did you come back for me and the kids? And I had to be honest and say, oh Lord, no. No, and that's probably not what she wanted to hear or the kids want to hear, but no. God's love is so much more powerful than the love we have for each other here. It's not there's no comparison. And I can remember her starting to cry, and I thought, oh my gosh, I just filleted the woman who stuck by me as 1.0. And she said, you know, if you'd have said anything else, it would have diminished my view of what heaven would be. And so, you know, I look at things like, you see the movie The Shack, you can argue the theology of that and all. You can take some artistic license, I don't care. The one place I will call, I'll just say bowl for now, is when they asked him if he wants to go back. If you're in the presence of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, you're not coming back. You would not ask. You would never ask to come back. So that would be the only part that I would have a little issue with on that one. So what God did through this experience answered my prayers. He sent me a billboard. I mean, that was a pretty big wake-up call. Hey, you're dead. Come talk to me. Are you there, Lord? Another thing I used to question, do you hear me? One that really got me is, am I important to you? Because I felt like everybody else was seeing his favor and I wasn't. But then I look at this. The Lord showed me the same favor that he showed John, Peter, Paul, and his brother. Wow. The Lord showed me the same favor as he showed Moses. Better make sure I'm back in the screen. That he showed Moses when he put him in the cleft of a rock and passed by. That's the same favor that he's just given me. What should I do going forward, Lord? It was lean into me. It was awesome that we were there. As I look at Matthew, and it talks about the narrow gate, and that many can walk on the wide path that leads to a wide gate that leads to destruction, but few walk on a narrow path through a narrow gate. God took me from a wide path to a narrow path to get me through a narrow gate. So now I'm upgraded. Upgrade is complete. I'm 2.0. I've changed quite a bit. I've been called to share my story. I do this with a lot of different people. I do it with groups. A lot of times it's one-on-one. When I went back to work, I had a line of people at my door who wanted to know what happened because they heard I died. It opened up a lot of opportunities. So I've prayed with people at work. I pray with people at Kroger's. Kroger's is a great prayer training ground. But some of the more fun ones that I've had, I've prayed with atheists. I've prayed with Hindus. I've prayed with Muslims. And it's all because of this story that got me there. And it's been a lot of fun to watch that. Some people, when I tell the story, and one of the things I'll say is telling your story. Everybody has one. Sean Boltz, I think, summed it up great when he said, learn to tell your story like a professional. Now, I watch Sean Boltz. I am not Sean Boltz. I can't tell a story like Sean Boltz, but at least I tell my story. And I encourage every one of you to do the same, because he will put somebody in front of you that needs to hear your story specifically. Some people tell me I'm crazy. A lot of people tell me I'm crazy, but that's a whole other topic. But a lot of people will get into this Rick Strassman study that they did in the 90s. He and 5 colleagues in New Mexico State actually went out and studied something called dimethyltryptamine. And dimethyltryptamine is a really powerful hallucinogen. They went off and they said, okay, we found the reason for near-death experiences, and they published this. Now, they never proved anything. The publication was later considered debunked by the medical community, but it still sticks in a lot of people's head as, hey, that's the gospel. But it's not. I mean, a couple of things that he left out was, yes, you will have euphoric experiences when you're on this stuff, but you also have just the same type of experience, that's fear and anxiety and pain when you first start. When you take this drug, you are very fuzzy after you've taken it. Well, when I came back on that hospital bed, there was nothing fuzzy about it. I can tell you where everyone was in that room. When they took me up to the OR, I could still walk you through everything they did in the procedure. There was nothing fuzzy about my head at all. So people will say that, and I let them go. The other thing I get is, hey, you were so lucky. What a coincidence. And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Let me tell you the story. And they're all about, well, 4 weeks prior to this event, I was cutting trees in Kentucky in the middle of nowhere where if I'd have had a heart attack, I wouldn't be here right now. 2 weeks prior, I was playing basketball with a bunch of college-age guys. Let that sink in for a minute. From 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. Yes, I said 10 p.m. because that's what a middle-aged guy should do. Had it happened then, I wouldn't be here. That day, we went to the late service because of the confirmation. We always go to the early service. That day, we drove past the new Westchester Medical Center, which was just in the beginning part of the development of a heart program. They had just started. Beck knew right away that I was having a heart attack. There was no question in her mind. I got that aspirin and got kicked out of that driver's seat faster than I knew what was going on. The cardiologist who was on call just happened to be driving down I-75 near the exit to the hospital. I was in front of the Westchester Hospital when I had a heart attack. Now, you add all that up, and people will say, wow, that's a lot of coincidences. Wow, are you really lucky? And I'll tell you, I'm not. I'm blessed. And why do I say that? I'm blessed by my Father. Because it says it very clear in Jeremiah. I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper not to harm you, but plans to give you hope and a future. And if that doesn't summarize what he did that day for me, I don't know what does. You talk about plans. Only God could orchestrate something that's that big. And it's amazing to me that he did. Now later, I'll tell you, this upgrade process doesn't stop at 2.0. I went out and cut trees with a bunch of guys in Neville, Ohio on the base camp property, which for all of you in the I'm In campaign, thank you, because that's what bought that property. And it was great. I went out there, a bunch of guys with chainsaws. It's a bunch of badass dudes. Oh, am I allowed to? Well, forgive me for saying badass. But it is. It's a bunch of, I mean, it's like manly men. You got chainsaws running. I was convinced that I'd go out there in the middle of an alpha male contest. And it was anything but. What I met were a bunch of guys that prayed together, a bunch of guys that embraced each other, a bunch of guys that cried together. I mean, it gets ugly. And if you tell any of them I said this, I will deny that. Oh, crap, it's on video. But it's an amazing group of men who took me in a different direction and showed me how to step in even further. From that, I started in the MASH tent out at Man Camp. Then I went to Critical Skills. Then I went to jump school. I've been a leader now in the MASH tent, and it's moved me to quite a different person. This is a picture that was taken at the last Man Camp. This was my group that I had the pleasure and the absolute honor of leading in the MASH tent. They were praying on me, and that Holy Spirit overwhelmed me to the point I was in tears, just crying ugly. And I'm actually proud of that. But I love what God has done with me and where he's put me. So what I'd like to do is leave you with a couple of thoughts and a couple of questions. A couple of thoughts. The first thought is, I am sitting at 3.0 right now, and this is the story of the beginning of 6.0 sometime in the future, and I can't wait to see what that is. I will look back at this time and go, wow, I just wasn't there yet. And I'm excited about how much further I can lean in. The other thing I want to tell you, if you ask me to explain heaven to somebody, the only thing I can tell you is it's freaking awesome. It is absolutely freaking awesome. And I can't wait to die so that I can live again. And now that's something you got to be careful where you say that, because my nurse in the ICU after I had the heart attack was very clear to me. He said, Tom, don't tell people that in the hospital. You'll end up in a padded room. But I'll be honest, I can't wait to die. I'm the idiot on the airplane. When it starts to dive, I'm cheering. I'm like, take us in, Lord, take us home. My wife, she's like, stop it. Then when it gets its buoyancy back and comes back up, everybody else breathes a sigh of relief, and I'm the one going, son of a gun, I really was hoping we were going in today. I can't wait to die. 2 questions I'll leave you with. So what is your primary focus in life? Is it your children? Is it family? Is it home, job, money, church? Is it anything other than our Lord? Is it anything other than Jesus? The second thing I'll ask is it time for you to get an upgrade? And if so, what kind of upgrade do you need? You know, I look at you, we got these tablets, and of course they've got the symbol of sin on the back of them. Probably should tell us something. But do you need an operating system upgrade? Do you need a complete upgrade like I had? I hope not. Don't do it my way. There's much better ways to do than what I did. Or do you just need some apps upgraded? Because that may be the other option. Is there's just some areas in your life that God would like to focus on and help you and move you forward. So if I could, I'd like to just close in prayer. Father, I just thank you for this time. I thank you for these women of Mason. I just thank you for what you're doing here. I ask that you visit each one of these people and tell them and show them what upgrades are needed, whether it's an operating system, whether it's an app, and what needs to happen. Make it clear to them where you want help, or not where you want help, but where they need help and you can provide it. And make it clear what that next step is. Father, we ask this in the name of the precious blood of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. That was awesome. I did just wanted to encourage you guys. Wow, unbelievable. One thing that really highlighted to me is you have a story, And your story may not be as dramatic, or you may not perceive it to be as dramatic. Your story might not have such a perfect bow that you can present and share a version 3.0 of it. You might still be at version 1.5 or version 2.0. But your story is one of the most powerful and effective tools you have to invite people in to the joy, the hope, the freedom, and the healing that you have received up to this point. So if you haven't taken time to reflect on and come up with what is my story and where are the moments that I have experienced freedom, joy, hope, restoration, I'm not a finished product yet, I get that. But there is some good stuff here, and I'd love to invite you to come and continue to journey with me as I develop into who it is that God has for me. So really, really powerful part of what Tom shared, and just wanted to encourage you with that. I'm asking him to stand up because there was one question that I felt like was kind of asked frequently when Mike and I had an opportunity to share, and that was women who were saying, man, it is so inspirational to see a man who gets it, who now is ready to lead, Tom, lead in this direction, and kind of has had an awakening. My husband's not there yet, or my significant other is not there yet, and there's a longing in me for that, and I would love some wisdom on how to encourage but not beat up, how to support but not try to control. How can I, as a wife, be the best partner for my husband and encourage him in that direction, because God hasn't yet for him. So anyway, that was one question I feel like might be a universal one in this group, and I just wanted to get your perspective.
Well, first of all, you asked for wisdom, so I'm kind of I'm out of the running already. No, if I look back at my journey, I think one of the things that was very helpful that Beck helped me with was her patience. She was patient with me because this started in my 20s and it didn't end until I was 45. So that's a long, dry spell to go through. Now, it wasn't all pain and suffering during that time, but she was very patient. She also was very encouraging, and I won't say she pushed me, but she did. She kind of, when I needed that push, she'd kind of say, go cut trees with guys, or go to church, or let's get to church. And that helped. I think one of the biggest things that helped me was getting into a community of men. I think that was key, is getting into a group of men who could help me on this journey, who have been there, who know that struggle, who know that identity crisis, and learn how to turn away from what the world tells you are to what God tells you you are. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's awesome. No, I think that's great. And then Tom said he's going to hang out in the atrium, and he took time off of work today to share with us, which we really, really appreciate. But he's just going to work from home, from Crossroads. So if you have something that you're really wanting to ask after your time in your small group, he's going to be here, and he's like, I'm available to talk if anybody has any questions or want to bounce anything off of me. So anyway, that's it. That's all I wanted to share, Tom. Thank you for preparing, for sharing.